Hello and welcome back to the blockchain.com podcast. My name is Garrick Heilman. I'm the head of research at blockchain.com and a visiting fellow at the London School of Economics. One of the most common questions we receive at blockchain.com is where can people go to learn more about crypto? Now, for over a decade, blockchain.com has tried to help by providing reliable data information. In addition to this podcast, we also have on our blog an intro to crypto guide, and every month we also publish a monthly outlook which contains at the bottom links to what we're reading and listening to. But no single person or institution can cover everything in crypto. The role of explaining the world of cryptocurrency largely rests with the broader media. Both traditional media and social media are incredibly important to the vast majority of people still new to crypto. In this latest installment in our ongoing discussion of the crypto media landscape, I spoke with Shin, a veteran crypto journalist and host of the popular Unchained podcast. Laura is one of the most well-respected journalists in crypto, and anyone who has followed her work knows she is not afraid of tackling thorny topics. In this episode, Laura and I discuss her background and what led her to first start reporting on Bitcoin, how media coverage of Bitcoin and crypto has evolved in the years since she began covering the industry, and we discuss Laura's new book coming out next month titled The Cryptopians: Idealism, Greed, Lies, and the Making of the First Big Cryptocurrency Craze. Blockchain.com will be giving out some free copies of this book, so keep an eye out on our Twitter feed for more details. Well, Laura, welcome to the blockchain.com podcast. We have a tradition where we ask all of our guests how they earned their first money.
Oh boy. That is a fascinating question because I don't know if I remember. I think so. It's either one of two things. It was either that because I worked at the Stanford Daily in college, and we were paid back then. So actually, that might have been it. Because hilariously, before going to college, I remember applying to various jobs, doing like waiting tables or working in a bookstore or whatever. And I never got any job like that. So when people always talk about kind of, their time doing like flipping burgers or whatever, like I actually never had a job like that. My first real, quote unquote, real job was as what's known as a Kelly girl, which like younger people may not know what this was. Like the term had to even be explained to me at the time, but it was basically working as a temp for a temporary services staffing agency called Kelly Services. But that was the summer after my freshman year of college. So I actually do think maybe the first money I ever made was writing for the Stanford Daily.
Wow. Well, I've never heard of Kelly Girls before, so that's a new one. I think you're the first to come on the show and mention that as it's a way. We get a lot of people actually who worked on farms for some reason within our company, because we always ask new hires at blockchain.com how they earn their first dollar. So I think farming is still number one.
Well, I actually am from Ohio, but I'm from like the suburbs, so yeah, didn't have much interaction with farms.
We're continuing our series here with you, interviewing the folks that typically do the interviewing. We had Frank from the Block on, and Natalie, who's a former broadcast journalist, Natalie Brunell, who's got a podcast now, and so we're really excited to chat with you about the role of the media in the crypto space and how it's evolved. You're, I think, one of the folks who's been covering crypto longest, who's actively, still active at least. I know some of the folks that I started working with at CoinDesk back in 2013. That was my first full-time gig in crypto. People like Emily Spavin and others, who was editor-in-chief back then, have kind of moved on to other things, and you've stuck with it. So I guess maybe a good place to start is tell us about your pre-crypto life and what first got you interested in crypto, and then we can chat about why it continues to be interesting, I guess.
Well, have been a journalist for a long time, so I think I'd been a journalist for over 15 years, maybe when I first got into crypto. And during that time, I'd covered all kinds of things. I never really found any particular beat, I would say, that really spoke to me. I had covered a lot of kind of like arts and culture things. I was also a yoga instructor, so I did kind of yoga slash health related things for a little while. Covered a little bit of travel, food, like more featurey, light, lighter fare, and then I went to grad school because I felt like climate change and sustainability would be a beat that would last me basically for the rest of my life. And I graduated in 2008, which was around the time that the media industry shrank about 22%. So, hilariously, if you look at the job, um, the percentage of graduates who got a job right out of graduation, 2008 was like the lowest year ever. It was like 62%, and like all the other years were much higher than that. So it took me a little bit longer to actually get a job back in journalism. But when I did, I started covering personal finance, and that was in 2011. And then a few years after that, I started freelancing for Forbes. And it was during that time that I was freelancing for Forbes where I was getting to this point where I kind of had felt like I learned most of the stuff that there was to learn about personal finance. And it just wasn't a beat that changed very much. So it was getting to the point where I had this feeling of, oh, am I going to kind of write the same sort of story idea, but with different words? And that's just like not the kind of thing I have any desire to do. I really like learning new things. And, I feel like if I'm going to write something, I'm going to give it my best shot that first try. And so, trying to do the same topic over again, but in a different way is maybe not my favorite thing. And at that time, they said, "Oh, well, we have this idea to do a Forbes FinTech 50 list. Do you want to be one of the lead reporters on it?" So I said yes. And the other reporter and I just divided the list into categories. And I took the category of digital currencies and became completely obsessed. And what I would say probably is that so not only was it that I kind of immediately realized, oh, this is probably just going to change the world, because at that point I understood enough about how the banking system worked through my coverage of personal finance, and even just generally from what I was learning about what fintech did and what kind of problems it was trying to solve. But also, it is a beat that is constantly changing, as we've seen. The at that time when I first got in, the kind of like conventional wisdom at that time in 2015 was blockchain, not Bitcoin. And so, actually, the first big magazine story I wrote about this technology was about how blockchain technology would make Wall Street more efficient. And clearly, I was very wrong. My sources were very wrong, and things have turned out quite differently. And of course, that's not to say that that's not going to happen. It's just that I think we would all say that the main things that have happened since that time have not really been in that arena. So, yeah, that was how I got started. And I think the reason crypto has kept my interest is because, like I said, it's constantly changing. I never feel like I can keep up. I'm constantly learning. It's always a challenge. And that is just the kind of thing I love.
That's awesome. So just to make sure I've got the timetable correct, this is roughly 2015 when you started
Yeah.
to focus on
Yep.
crypto. Okay,
Yeah.
okay,
Like
yeah.
May
So
2015, I think, is when I fell down the rabbit hole.
yeah. No, I'm thinking back to that. That's when we organized the first consensus conference in New York, and I remember folks like Blythe Masters, who was appearing on magazine covers back then, very much talking about how blockchain technology was going to transform Wall Street, and that was all the rage. One of the ways I first came across your work was a pretty hard hitting piece of journalism you did uh, on the Tapscots, who were also at the time very much in the blockchain for corporates, written about this, and young Tapscott, I believe, got in some trouble. And I think you may have been the one who kind of exposed this for circulating. You correct me if I'm wrong on the details. They were circulating a pitch deck for a business venture that had some pictures of people like, I think, Katie Hahn and others as advisors who hadn't actually agreed to be involved in this. And it was quite a provocative piece. It really was like, whoa, there's journalists really covering, critically this whole space. This isn't just a, kind of a trade press kind of situation where it's all positive, and you weren't afraid to kind of go after some dubious business behavior. Is that kind of basically the story, or feel free to kind of tell it from A to Z? Because that, I think, was a big moment, I think, for the crypto media kind of gaining some credibility, in my eyes, at least.
Yeah, I mean, so you got the outlines of the story correctly. Yeah, and the one key piece of it was that the fund that he was trying to raise for, it was to go public. So, there are pretty strict laws around what you're supposed to tell people, and it's kind of simple. It's you're supposed to tell them the truth. And so to have essentially not told the truth about multiple people that they were claiming as advisors, that was, something that I felt was important for people to know. And, they were big names and they were pretty strategically chosen, it felt like, because one kind of maybe seemed affiliated with, or not affiliated, but had an association in the public's mind with Bitcoin, another one with maybe Ethereum, another one with Ripple. And so it was, or Katie, maybe with regulation, which obviously gives a lot of credibility. And so, yeah, that was something that, when I found out about it, it was clearly a story. It was clearly something people had to know about. If you were going to put your money into this, you would want to know, oh, hey, the people that are asking me to give up millions of my dollars to have them manage are not telling me the truth about who is associated with their project. So, I actually knew Alex personally. We had met at a retreat on Necker Island, and I was friendly with him. And so, I mean, it's awkward, but I'm doing my job. It's not anything personal. Even to this day, I think we're still friends on Facebook. I'm sure if we saw each other, we would say hello. And there's nothing personal. I know his father as well. But like I said, this is clearly something that they were doing that was yeah, something I'm sure that the Securities and Exchange Commission in Canada or Toronto or Ontario, I believe it was, would frown upon. So I reported on it.
And for, I think the question that kind of, I think, follows from that is kind of, I guess, your perspective on how coverage of crypto has evolved. I mean, back in 2013, with CoinDesk, it was very early days for media coverage of crypto, and I think there was some coverage, coming from like Wired magazine as early as 2011. You'd see the occasional article on a Valleywag or Gawker, I think, about like the Silk Road in those early days. Then you have CoinDesk kind of coming into the space in 2013. And just kind of walk us through, because you've been in this space for so long, how you think media coverage has evolved from when you first got involved to where we are today. And what's the state of media coverage? Is it a healthy, balanced kind of media landscape for crypto? Is there room for improvement? What things would you change if you were the all powerful media supervisor for this whole sector?
Well, I think you have the full range. There's obviously probably reporters who are maybe less familiar with all the nuances, who probably get some things wrong, or they maybe repeat certain phrases that have become mantras, even though maybe the facts don't necessarily back those claims up. And so, you have kind of that happening at one end, but I would never judge one of those people because, as a reporter, I'm sure I've gotten a lot of things wrong, or I'm sure that there were times when I maybe was approaching a subject and didn't have as much background as, would have been better to have. But everybody has to start somewhere. And frankly, coming to a topic with quote unquote beginner's mind is actually also an advantage, because sometimes as a newer reporter, you can kind of notice something that other people have just gotten used to and pick up on it as a story, whereas like others maybe, because they've kind of been in the industry too long, almost don't see things with fresh eyes. And so there can be an advantage in that as well. And so, each time somebody creates a piece, they're going to come at it with, whatever experience they do or don't have. And in either scenario, that can be an advantage or a disadvantage. And so, then at the other end, you have people who probably do understand a lot of the nuance, and so they can report in that way. And I do think, obviously, that's probably a really great and wonderful thing. For instance, probably this one storyline that the crypto community has been dealing with since day one is this association that crypto has with crime. And, maybe in the beginning that was a somewhat more fair characterization, simply because Silk Road was the big first use case of crypto that took off. But as time has gone on, obviously, that has become less the story. But there definitely are certain people in the media who still perpetuate that narrative without knowing the facts. If you do actually look up the facts, then you will see that Chainalysis reports that crypto crime, I believe, I actually will need to see if they have released a more recent report, but the last one I saw showed that less than 1% of all crypto transactions were crime associated. And then when you look at the traditional financial system, I believe this was it was either an IMF or World Bank report. I think it was IMF. I don't remember. This was a while ago. I looked these statistics up, but whatever that report was, it was from a global financial a kind of organization, and they said that they estimated that between 2 and 5% of all transactions in the traditional financial world are illicit, are for illicit activity. And so clearly, at this moment, the traditional financial system is much more associated with crime than crypto. But if you ask any everyday person on the street who really just takes a passing interest in crypto, they're probably going to think the opposite. And so these narratives do linger. They're kind of a little bit difficult sometimes to change around. I actually saw this recently about environmental issues involving NFTs. In like, basically, it's like a friend of mine on Facebook, and I, of course, just had to comment. I mean, it's somebody I'm very friendly with, but I had to say, "Oh, well, here are the actual facts about all that," and just explaining that actually we don't really know what the energy mix is at the moment, and that since so many, in fact, pretty much all the mining that was in China has moved out, more likely, whatever the mix will be going forward will be cleaner than what it used to be, and et cetera, et cetera. And so, when it comes to the media, reporters are on deadline. They have to sometimes move very quickly. And sometimes the sources that they get aren't the best sources. And so sometimes you end up quoting people who later you realize, oh, they maybe didn't back up their statements as well as they could have, or you didn't get the person that you wanted, or, whatever it might be. And so I do think that just with the kind of like, what's the word, like great broader spectrum of people covering this, that overall the crypto community probably is enjoying much better coverage of the space than early on when there were so many fewer people covering crypto. But yeah, of course, there are going to be hits and misses, and that's just the name of the game. And yeah, overall, I would say that probably the media has both improved and could improve further. Probably the one other thing that I would like to add is that I kind of, the tagline for my show is "You're no hype resource for all things crypto," and I do prefer that sort of like not hyped up style of reporting. In my mind, like hopefully people can still glean that despite the fact that I don't put in any effort into hyping this stuff up. I think it's so cool and I love it. But to my mind, it's like the facts are cool enough. Like all I have to do is present the facts. And yeah, that sometimes means reporting on some of the negative things because there certainly are negative aspects to all of this. But that doesn't, I don't think, detract from the larger story, which is that this technology is going to bring about a lot of good in the world and it's going to really shake things up in a good way. So yeah, I'm frankly excited to see more of the coverage and to see more of the improvement in it.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, when people ask me about like what's changed in crypto, obviously a lot's changed. But one of the things I like to highlight is just, even as recently as 2017, the last cycle of kind of significant adoption prior to the current one. I mean, just the number of podcasts that are available, the number of resources out there has just, I think, grown massively. And it's a question that we continue to get all the time, where to go to find reliable information. Where can I go to, learn about cryptocurrencies? And, it's a much improved kind of situation today than it was even just a few years ago. Thanks to the good work by yourself and others.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, even a lot of crypto companies like your own have their own little, podcasts or broadcasts or whatever it is that they're doing. So clearly, there are a lot of options.
So let's talk a bit about kind of the state of crypto today. And I'm glad you brought up some of these kind of lasting narratives, problematic narratives around crime and the very complex kind of story that is, proof of work mining and how much energy is consumed and, whether or not it's boiling the oceans. What's your kind of overall sense of, where crypto is at today in terms of some people talk about crossing the chasm to mainstream adoption. Are we there yet? Are these kind of persistent narratives around crime and energy consumption a barrier to getting there? Do you feel like these um, questions or these concerns can be addressed anytime soon, or they're going to continue to drag down the space and prevent many people um, from adopting and using cryptocurrency?
No, I would definitely say that mainstream adoption is getting underway. I mean, clearly, looking at the last year with NFTs, hilariously, I guess probably a year and a couple months ago, I had Jake Bruckman on my show, and he was telling me about NFTs, and he was saying that NFTs were going to bring normies in. And I was like, oh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But, I didn't really kind of grasp just how quickly that was going to happen. And, very, very quickly after I realized, oh, whoa, he's clearly right, and we're seeing, I mean, just look at the last year with these headlines around the different NFT things like, obviously NBA Top Shot, but then all the sort of similar follow-on agreements that were brokered with other big sports leagues. Like there were some soccer ones. There was another one with the WNBA. And then to branch out to seeing the sponsorships of the different arenas in Miami and Los Angeles, and then advertisements for FTX that included like Tom Brady and Gisele Bundchen. Like, I mean, it's very, very different from crypto even just a few years ago. And because actually, if I think about 2017, what was fascinating is when those celebrities would get involved, typically it felt more like a scam and less like kind of an endorsement you could trust, right? If we remember and kind of like some of the Floyd Mayweather or Paris Hilton or shoot, I'm just blanking on who some of the other people were that tweeted about various ICOs. But this time, there was kind of a broader legitimacy to it all. And um, like I said, just a lot of people that you wouldn't typically think of as being in this world were getting in. I mean, Ashton Kutcher and his wife did a show where you had to like buy NFTs or something to watch it. So clearly mainstream adoption is definitely underway. And if you look at somebody like Beeple, who now really feels like a crypto person, he was doing his digital art for 13 years before this, right? He had like this other arena where he was an established a professional, and then suddenly it's like he's veering off into, or not veering, but he's doing the same work, but it's just now combined with crypto. And so there's so many other stories like that. And so in that regard, I really feel like it's drawing the normies in. There, I think are going to be much bigger announcements that we're going to see, many more, as the year went on. Like, Quentin Tarantino was getting involved. I think there's like other Hollywood types that are getting involved from, certain things I've heard from various sources. So, um, I would actually say brace yourselves because it's probably going to just keep encroaching on these other areas that we don't typically think of as being associated with crypto. Oh, and yeah, by the way, Snoop Dogg has an Anon account, and with his Anon account, he's been buying NFTs and tweeting about them. So, it's definitely going in that direction. There's just no question. As Fred Ursum, the co-founder of Coinbase, tweeted, and he's now co-founder of Paradigm, he tweeted, "Turns out more people are interested in culture than money." And I was like, "Oh yes, that would accurately reflect my own friends and my real life world." So, yes, I think that's where this is all going.
Yeah, definitely. So people who are coming to crypto for the first time and stepping into Twitter and seeing some of the arguments and food fighting that goes on social media among different camps might be a little confused, maybe even turned off at some of the aggressive tweeting. And I was just curious about your perspective on, what some people refer to as kind of the tribalistic nature of crypto, and this term maximalism, that's associated with certain cryptocurrencies, and people being a maximalist for, say, Bitcoin or Ethereum, and really attacking other cryptocurrencies. Do you think this is a negative thing on whole for the cryptocurrency space, and does kind of turn people away? Do you think it actually might have some healthy competition kind of side to it, where this kind of competition between the different kind of protocols actually makes everything stronger and better at the end of the day? What's your view on all that?
So my view is that the tribalism doesn't turn everybody off, clearly, because there are, new people who come in and join one of these tribalistic crowds. So for the people who it attracts, that's kind of like a bonus for them. It's something that appeals to them and something they want to participate in. For others, yeah, it might be a turnoff, but there are plenty of other people who don't have that same tribal attitude that they can also hang out with and talk about crypto with. So I feel like everybody will sort of find their place. And in that regard, it really doesn't differ that much from normal everyday life, where like if you look at any religion, you're going to maybe meet some practitioner of that religion on the street who doesn't kind of wear their religion on their sleeve. And then you might meet another practitioner of that religion who is more of a proselytizing type, who is going to try to convert you, or going to talk a lot about their participation in their faith. And so it's really just kind of you whatever flavor you like, you will find that. And I mean, one thing that I do think is probably going to happen is that I do think maybe the tribalistic voices will become a smaller minority because just if you look at the world in general, most people, like you probably hear reference to those sort of more extreme voices typically as like um, the loud minority or like a fringe voice, or I mean, and I'm not talking about in crypto in general, but just in anything where there's kind of like the hardcore group that is very vocal. They don't tend to represent the minority or the majority for pretty much anything, whether it's, like I said, religion or sports or whatever it might be. And so I do think as crypto continues to grow and get more people into it, there will probably just simply by virtue of human nature be more of the people who don't have such tribalistic or fanatical views.
I think there was a lot of wisdom in your words there, and we'll be pointing people who come to us to ask us about all this food fighting they see on social media to, I think, this little explanation of it. So I want to ask you about trying to learn about what's happening on the ground in some markets that it can sometimes be difficult to access as a journalist, as a researcher, as anyone. I'm thinking in particular China and other places around the world that have very significant crypto activity, or at least have had in the past, and you know, aren't always as transparent and easy to kind of gain insights on as others. How have you approached that, like trying to figure out what's really happening on the ground in China, say with this, the latest crackdown or prior crackdowns, or what's happening in other places where there isn't as a transparent landscape for media, data, research, etc. How do you approach that?
So, so I have never written a story that was trying to figure out what was going on the ground in China or anything like that. So I can't speak to that necessarily, but I can talk about my book where there's a lot of news in the book. There's a lot of things that haven't been reported on before that I managed to get, and for that, what it came down to was kind of gaining the trust of a lot of people. There were definitely a lot of materials that it took me a while to coax someone to either give me access to or just give to me outright. And what I did a lot also was, constantly ask various sources like, who should I be talking to? Who should I be talking to? Whether it was about this or that, or, I was always trying to get different names, trying to figure out what's the best way to approach this person. Does it make more sense for me to reach out to them cold, and so that they don't know, so that they don't have to reveal to you that they might, do the interview with me, or do you think it would be better if you made the introduction? Lots of discussions like that. Um, and there was also a lot of just like reading and sleuthing and um, not being afraid to follow random leads on the internet. Um, just, yeah, basically going down a lot of internet rabbit holes. And one good thing that helped me a lot, I think, was that people knew my work. And so that, I think, did a lot of that work of building trust with sources. And so, in a way, if somebody knew me, not everybody knew me, obviously, when I was reaching out, but in the cases where they had heard of me or they had heard a podcast or read my articles or whatever it might be, I think that helped, that they knew that I was serious about this work, that I understood the technology, that I have had, like, previous to writing the book, I have had other sources say to me things like, "Oh, I really appreciate when you write articles about me because I notice you never take my quotes out of context. So, if I'm going to use somebody's quote, I don't just like use it for my own ends, but I um, use it to um, buttress a point that is in line with their larger point. Because even if I can only pull a sentence, I'm just going to use it to make the same point that they were making to me in the conversation. So things like that, I feel helped quite a lot. And then, frankly, some of it's luck. I mean, there's one person who spoke with me who, is a key character in the book, and I they had told me, oh yeah, because there were other people who'd written books, on early Ethereum, and they said, oh yeah, I haven't talked to any of the other reporters, just you. I said, oh, why did you just agree to talk to me? And they were like, I don't know, I just hadn't talked to any of the others, and then finally I was like, I should just tell my story somewhere. And so you reached out and you were it. And I was like, oh wow, okay.
Very cool.
um
So the book, by the way, is a forthcoming book, if I'm not mistaken, right? It's not actually available yet. The
it comes out
Cryptopians.
February 22nd. Yeah, the
Okay, great.
Cryptopians. Yeah.
Yep. Idealism, greed, lies, and the making of the first big cryptocurrency craze comes out February 22nd. So you can pre-order it on Amazon and elsewhere. And I wanted to ask you about writing a book about crypto, given how fast, pace this space is and the very real risk. I mean, I face this when we do research. We put up a price chart, the price drops 20%. We're like, oh boy, we have to redo that.
Yeah, but
I
Garrick,
mean,
no, it's a narrative nonfiction book, and the events that I cover, the main action ends in early 2018.
Got it. Okay, so yeah, you're going into the history here, which is kind of frozen in time, which is nice, and Ethereum features pretty prominently, correct, in the book.
Yeah, I would say because it describes how the ICO craze happened and Ethereum was the main platform for that. The roughly, I would say maybe 75 or 80% of the book is a history of Ethereum. And there's 4 pretty meaty chapters on the DAO attack because that was definitely the biggest event in Ethereum's history. And when I went in to cover that, I really had no idea of what had really happened. And yeah, once I got in there, I was like, oh my God, there's a lot. So yeah, that was really fun and fascinating to report.
And it's still relevant because it keeps getting brought up to this day. A lot of folks, for example, in the Solana community, will reference this, or when the Ethereum community is attacking some other group or criticizing some other protocol, people will say, "What about the DAO?" And so this history is still very much with us today and relevant to what's playing out right now.
Yeah, I
Laura, we're
myself think about it a lot actually because of all these hacks in DeFi and
mhm.
other governance issues with DAOs. So yes, I'm reminded of
Yeah.
what happened with the DAO a lot.
Yeah, no, I remember being at DevCon 2 in Shanghai, and this is just a few months after that, and I remember a lot of the Ethereum developers were looking around, wondering, "Is the hacker here?" I think it might be this guy. It was, it was very, very, it was a very big deal, to put it mildly, and continues to be important to the crypto space. We're just about out of time, Laura, and I want to also give you a chance to tell people beyond the book where they can go to follow your work, to hear your interviews, and then also, in addition to you letting people know where people can go to learn more about you and follow your work, what, if you're comfortable sharing, um, what other sources do you find most helpful? Because again, people are always asking where to go to get reliable information. Do you mind sharing a recommended podcast or a person to follow on Twitter, or even a journalist? Are you comfortable doing that?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's so many. So for my work, you can go to my website, unchainedpodcast.com. You can also follow me on Twitter at Laura Shin. And I also have the Unchained podcast account on Twitter, which is unchained_pod. And yeah, definitely, if you haven't yet, pre-order the book, which is at bit.ly/cryptopians. And that's spelled CRYPTOPIANS. And as for other resources, I definitely find probably the three main crypto media very good: Coindesk, The Block, and Decrypt. And a lot of mainstream media, I feel like, is quite good at covering crypto. I know for whatever reason, the crypto community likes to rag on the mainstream media, but if you find the right reporters in that world, you can definitely find good coverage. Obviously, I want to give a shout out to my former colleagues at Forbes. Well, actually, I never worked with Michael Del Castillo. He was hired after I left, but we are sort of what's the word, honorary colleagues, and also Jeff Coughlin. And in terms of other publications, I would say there's good coverage at Bloomberg. I actually also really like reading even like the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal on a lot of crypto stuff, because I feel like they get things like regulation and other things involving the traditional financial markets and crypto really well. And yeah, other than that, if you're interested in DeFi, I would say the Defiant is a great resource. And if you're somewhat new to the space, then I've really enjoyed Patrick O'Shaughnessy's different series on his podcast, where it's Invest Like the Best, but then he also has a new one that is focused on Web3. And I think it's called Web3 Breakdowns, but I forget um, what the exact name is of that show. I can picture the what's it called, the podcast cover in my mind. I just can't picture that or recall the name. But yeah, I mean, there's so much good media. So if I were you, I just get on crypto Twitter and start following a bunch of people, and pretty soon you will find the sources that you like.
Great advice. Laura, thank you so much for joining us today. A real pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you're enjoying our podcast, please rate us and leave a review, as it really helps boost our visibility to more listeners.